I look at that area down there too, it's not quite the 61% retracement of the entire movement. That would be the 361. So I remember looking at the 61 earlier and seeing that it was at the 361. We are at the entire movement 61% retracement, which has a high volume node because we spent so much time there overnight. So rather than looking at these fibs here, I think that the major fibs that we have on here, like this major 61 that never got any kind of response, it failed to get to the 127, 141, which could actually be a ticket right back to it. We can see that the initial positive response is bringing it back to the major 61 that we had from the giant upwards movement. So typically we like to test those from below. And the movement structure that we have today is very sideways up and down, and returning back to where the sideways began. I would have thought that the red-yellow line would get a retest as well, as it was never actually retested, but it's still within the realm of the 127 and 141. So I'm thinking about this level right up here. Curious about, in the event that we made that retracement back to that node, where would the 61 be? It would be generally in that area as well. And as a short-term level, like this smaller one can work as a barrier until we break it, because it's good for short-term profit taking. 61 that we're hitting right now. See how it's working as a barrier? It's temporary, but short-term, it's really important to understand that. At least today. All of those things are subject to change in the future, but so long as we understand the market as it is now and the way that it likes to be treated now, then we can see that what it wants becomes very predictable and appropriate. The short term, we've managed to pull down almost to the 61 here. It looks like we're hitting it now. So now they're done. The report is over. The 61's managed to go farther than the next 61. So typically we've been going 61 to 61, and now we've managed to crush through a little bit past that 61. We know that we're coming up to the lows of the entire consolidation down here, but obviously getting through that area is really important. So we're moving really well towards the target. So remember, this is the area that it has been comfortable in the most. In the morning we went sideways here for a pretty long time, very similar to what we did when we were in this area up top. We're kind of locked into it again. So you can see we're using the bottom of the node basically, where it was appropriate to have support in this area before. We've kind of been caught up in the area where it was appropriate to have support and resistance. In a way, it's kind of like we have green zone and red zone here. What it reminds me of is the relationship between the 188-200 and the 261. You know, how we have the 188-200 and the 261 is the green zone and red zone here. And from the 261 we've fallen down to hit that 188-200. And notice it's like a 3 drives pattern in the sense that our two lows are very similar in distance apart. 3 drives. Everything we've done out of the bottom of the green zone can be placed on the top of the red also. The distance that we need to make it to the 61 at the top is the same distance that we've went out of the bottom of the green zone. Coincidence? It gives us so much time to look for these things and to understand that it likes to make them perfect. The name of the game is to traverse the entire node again and get back above the red zone. The level that we couldn't make it through a moment ago. But like I was mentioning before as well, the sideways up and down that we see here, it started with sideways, it went up, then went down and returned right back to where it went sideways originally, making that sideways up then down pattern. But like I said, just as everybody's, getting to their breaking point, assuming that it's going to continue to be the way that they see it, their experiences, they try to say, hey, this is my experience and it's probably going to be like that again, and nope, They're closer to change than ever before and they don't even know it. Right at the point that they're willing to quit is the moment that it starts to be different and not the way they thought it was going to be. I consider the people that I'm up against in this industry like the people of 100 years ago, able to easily sit through a sideways consolidation of half an hour. But I can tell you that, there's a completely different market environment after we make people wait, because it takes patience and it takes discipline to survive a consolidation. If it's especially one that's just, very, very tight, offering no patterns until it's over, just sideways chop and grind. And people will make excuses like you don't need to understand it, or you don't need to spend time doing it, or this and that. And I'm like, well, that's you. I'm different. I take it seriously. And there's no excuses for me not to understand it. 61% retracement at the end of this consolidation too. Almost hit it, but just reminds me of yesterday. Some of the most effective ones yesterday almost hit. And I mean, this has been a process of smashing that green zone from the underside multiple times until we can finish this consolidation. Now, just understand that this line at the top up here, I'll make it red-yellow. It is the trend. Sorry, red-yellow. It is the trend until we break it. And we know that this chop that we have here now can only last so long before it meets that line and it's forced to break it. And what was the situation before? Look at the last one. It took a long time, but finally when it broke that line, it came down all the way to retest it even, to show the respect that it had for it, and then continue beyond it. And here, this line is built the same way, just from today. No other line has been formed with the same characteristics as this one since we formed that one. This is the only other one that could be placed remotely similarly to that one. So I don't mind it. It does create a threshold marker that insinuates that when we break that threshold, we could end this consolidation and potentially begin a trend again. And the trends of the day have been really steep and actually quite similar. Like this trend right here took this much time and it made that much distance. It's very similar to what we did when we moved up. It was very, very, very fast and sharp, and it's almost like we've done that movement twice. And when we came down, we did a movement that was very similar, but we only did it once. Now, of course, when we moved up most recently, it was a specifically smaller movement that we haven't seen anywhere else. That could be the cause of the break of the trend too. I find it ironic that if I simply move that over once, where does it take us to? Well, the highest volume node, the area that has the most people clumped in up there. So I don't mind that. But obviously it involves getting through this range and breaking that trend. There is no way that we can make any one of those moves without breaking that trend. So we necessarily, it all becomes about that trend break. It's like the door that needs to be open to begin the journey. That's the way I look at it. It's all about getting through the range ultimately though. We can see the effort here now. Short term, many people will be looking at it like, an inverse head and shoulders. That's the closest concept in play. Obviously we have a left shoulder head, right shoulder underway. Makes me wonder about where the 61 could be. It only has about 5 to 10 minutes left with this trend before it has to actually try and break it. Now, we could exert energy to try and stay with the trend, but that's like it's a tough thing to demand. It's far easier to try and break the trend, but if it has such low energy, is it going to break the trend well? And if it does, will it need to retest? It's a major question, because it means that, okay, any positions that are exposed to the red-yellow line breaking have to watch out for any movement that happens after the red-yellow line to be taken back. And that can look like a retest of any size. It doesn't necessarily say how big the move could be. Could it be just a green zone to red zone? Could it be a larger movement that takes everything back from where the trend broke? Like, how many times do we have to actually come back to where the trend broke in the recent trend breaks? Like, we do this almost ridiculously. It's crazy that it has to do that, but where the trend breaks from, it's almost like the point where it's too late to get excited about the trade. Because everything past the point that the trend broke, regardless of its size, like I show this one here because look at how big that movement is and how much it can say, all right, even if it's a very large move that seems like it's getting away for a long time, can specifically come back down just to get the people that bought after the trend break. And I mention this now prior to when the trend breaks, so everybody can mentally prepare for this thing to happen, because it doesn't feel good, does it? Like when it does that and it comes all the way back down, and it's almost like here when the trend broke from this very steep dump, everything that it did kind of came back sort of to the same magnitude that this one did here. That's not too far off the same kind of concept when you really think about it. It pushes up really, really significantly and takes back most of it. I'm like, is that what it did here? I'm like, oh yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. And what does that look like? Well, that simply is a 61% retracement, and it can really feel like a lot more than that sometimes. So the trend breaks. We go to the red zone. Is it supposed to do this? Was it supposed to take all that time? Use the inverse head and shoulders, break the trend, get to the red zone from the green zone, traverse the node, break the 61, right? All of those things, can be remembered and relayed into tomorrow's toolbox and even later days toolbox, where when we see anything that we've just went over, we can look at all of the other corresponding factors and correlating indications at the time, and all of the different ideas that we had around that moment. What was it part of? It was the part where we met sideways, up, down, and came back to the middle and made this chop. And, all of that stuff can also be tied in with, hey, this is how we broke trends at this time. We used an inverse head and shoulders. We went down to the 61. All of those different facts of the environment. We used the green zone and red zone. We broke through, the node. We traversed this area. How are we going to treat the gap? What about the B points on the other side of the range that have never been tested? What about getting on top of this B point? Is it going to look like smashing the red zone from above? You know what I mean? And what about everything we've ever done below the green zone? Will we be able to put that on top of the red zone? It wasn't exactly that even in the morning, but the idea of making that sideways up then down, turning back to the middle, usually makes it pretty even on both sides. And today, it was a little bit past the 61 of the bigger movement, obviously. That's, if we were to look at just the 61 of this entire move, that's where the 61 is. Which is really interesting to me too, because it reminds me of the movement of the morning. Like if you take this movement all the way over here, and you see that this is how we treated the 261 right here, and how it spiked through it and like almost sprang through it like that. Like that was the vibe, right? And that was the 261. That's how we treated that 261. That's how they bought it through the 261. Pre-market was entirely set up to make this movement happen. And it's very clear that the 261 was directly associated with its B point. It was right there. And it was also directly associated with this node that was made so clear yesterday, because we spent just so much time at that level. So it became such a large boundary that everything ran into that boundary and we knocked it down once. Now the thing is it's going to be a lot more softened up the next time we get to it, which I believe we will. Like I said, going to all-time highs on the table, and I am looking for that soon too. And it's all part of the journey. If this is going to be the journey that takes us to all-time high, it doesn't matter how long it takes. Do you want to be on it is the question. Now, of course, this is the 61 of the entire dump down. How important has it been to make 61s reverse today? Now, it's been very important, but I'll show you what happened a minute ago. This one didn't work. And it was on the failure of that one not working that this trend was made. So be careful, because you know where everything loved the 61? Everything loved the 61 when we were in this area here. But now that area is part of an old trend that's now broken and not the trend anymore. So its ways don't matter because it's not the trend anymore. You see what I mean? Now I want to talk about something else. This difference on the bottom that we have is exactly something that we could be interested in making even on both sides, which would take us again to this movement up here. Now, I already talked about this movement happening again. And where would that take us to? You know, the same point. So we failed that 61 here. This B point has been crushed. Now, this one lives on. We have to consider the fibs for it. This is a 61 that also failed. You know, because it's kind of interesting to me. The 61 that failed is actually a freaking massive 61. In just like a cesspit of 61s that have been working. Sometimes they work so well we don't even get all the way to them, kind of thing, because people are so eager to get involved with it. And I'm like, wow, okay, now this one comes along and they didn't even budge at it. Instant failure on that level. Very interesting to me. And it was only since this trend broke that we were able to do anything like this one. Like this 61 right here is probably the most squeezed 61 all day. That 61 is squeezed. Like the people that are stuck in that 61 until we go back to that point are trapped. And this trend is being fueled on that failure. So I find that very interesting. Now we come across another level, which is a 188-200. And like at the end of the day, this is one of the giant nodes of the area, the highest volume node of the area next to this gold bar that we had yesterday.